Welcome to the PR Maven Podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. Stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven, and I have been working in PR throughout my very long career, and I have a special interest in personal branding. It's what makes you stand out from everyone who does the same thing that you do, and it attracts people to what you have to offer. I'm a keynote speaker, an author, and a columnist for the Forbes Agency Council and Maine Biz. My audiences have said that helping them think about their superpower has changed the way they think about their careers and their lives. I hope you like this episode, and I hope you'll share it with other people who might be interested in hearing it. Today with me is my guest, Steve McCausland, who's a communications specialist at Marshall Communications. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Nancy.
It's nice to have you here. Steve McCausland has been, was served for 32 years as the spokesman for the Maine Department of Public Safety, handling information on over 500 homicides, another 500 fire deaths, and thousands of motor vehicle fatalities. Before retiring, he had a role in every major criminal investigation the department was involved in over 3 decades. He served as an advisor to 8 commissioners of public safety and 8 chiefs of the Maine State Police on media relations and public and governmental policy. Steve started his media career as the news director of the radio station in Bath, Maine, and worked part-time for the Portland Press-Herald, the Associated Press, and WCSH-TV, which is now called News Center Maine in Portland. He was elected and served 20 years on the Brunswick, Maine Town Council, serving 6 of those years as chairman. So you've had quite a career, Steve.
What a guy. That's all I can say. Just what a guy. But it's amazing how quick it went by, too.
Yes.
As you know, with your 35 years doing this, it was just yesterday you were, just starting out, and now here we are.
I know. So you were the spokesman for Maine Public Safety for 30 plus years. Tell us about the position and the responsibilities involved.
I'm the conduit between the investigators and the news media. And my phone rang constantly 24/7, weekends, holidays, sick days. There was no stopping this. And what I did is craft the message that I would get the raw information from investigators. Many times there were things that we did not want to talk about because there was an ongoing investigation, and I'd craft a response because I knew I was going to get the question. And then I would either issue a news release, or reporters would show up in my backyard and want a soundbite right there in Brunswick. And I did that for 32 years. It was constant.
Yeah, so sometimes in the middle of the night, you were at your typewriter, right?
Yes, I was in my office, and there was an Amber Alert that we issued one day. I issued it from the house, and I was sick that day. But it needed to go out, and so I went down and got on the computer and pounded it out, and, all of Maine and New Hampshire knew that this little girl was missing, and it was the next day a hunter found them in a truck out in the woods, and at gunpoint arrested the man, and the little girl was safe. And I take satisfaction that I had a role in that by getting that Amber Alert out.
Yes, especially because you're a father and a grandfather.
Yes, yes, very much so.
So you've been involved with many traumatic crisis situations throughout the course of your career. Tell us about some of them and how you were able to stay calm in the face of crisis.
In the last year, so this was 2019, there was a major explosion in Farmington. There was a gas leak inside the building. They had evacuated the building. Firefighters showed up to try to find the source, and they were accompanied by the building manager who knew the building inside and out. A spark occurred, and in a matter of seconds, that building disappeared from the face of the earth. It was a 3-story building, and One firefighter was killed, half dozen others were seriously injured, and the building manager also was severely burned. I got the word very quickly. I knew we'd have to do a news conference. I set the news conference up, I think, for 2 o'clock so that everyone knew, the media knew that at 2 o'clock, the official statements were going to be coming out. And then I headed for Farmington. And when I got up there, it reminded me of the footage you saw after 9/11 in New York. This plume of dust and smoke and debris was still floating all over this area of Farmington. But they set up a command post very close in Cop Talk. That is the central place. That's where the decisions are made. Firemen, law enforcement, and the command post was there. The news conference was scheduled. Governor Mills, which is her hometown, was diverting her schedule to get over there as well. And at 2 o'clock, we gave the first official comments as to what was going on. And then following some other news releases were released later in the day, including the names of all the victims. That was released early evening.
Right. So you had to be prepared on a moment's notice to drop everything in Augusta, go to Farmington, and didn't you train a spokesman from the fire department?
One of the firefighters, the last person standing, literally, was one of the deputy chiefs. He was not at the scene. He knew the men that were injured. His own son was among those that were seriously injured. And at the command post, I looked around and sort of spotted him, and he needed to be. There was only one person in the world that could talk about what that commitment was of the men of the Farmington Fire Department and what it meant and the commitment they had. And it was him. He was the last man standing. And I gave him a few pointers. I wanted to make sure I had all the names correctly spelled, their rank and how long they've been with the fire department. And I said, you're up to it. Because if you're not, it's essential that Maine hears from Farmington Fire Department. And he shook his head. I says, I think I can do it. And he went off to change into a uniform. And when he came back at the 2 o'clock news conference, governor was there, fire marshals, Farmington police, Farmington's town manager, and there was this deputy chief. And he nailed it. And I felt good that at least I think I gave him some guidance of what to say, how to say it. And it needed to be said because there were 6 firefighters at that point in the hospital. And one, in addition to that, the 7th, had died at the scene. And before that afternoon was out, because Farmington's fire department was basically decimated for manpower, other fire departments from all over the state came roaring into Farmington to man that fire department. And it was an incredible story of resilience. And I played a part in it. And it was basically just organizing it, getting it rolling, and then we got the information out in a very timely fashion.
So what advice did you give him exactly?
I basically said, I know this is incredibly hard for you, but you are the only one that can explain to the public, Farmington first and foremost, but the rest of the state of Maine, of what the sacrifice that these firefighters made this morning. And you know them personally, you know their families, you know the commitment to the fire department, and you need to touch upon that. So Maine understands who these men are that are fighting for their lives in some cases back at the hospital. All 6 have survived, but one was obviously killed at the scene.
Right.
And he did just a great job, and I was incredibly proud of the man, considering that he was headed immediately after that news conference to the hospital for the first time to see the injured, including his own son.
Yeah. Now, another time there was a van accident that you were involved with where there was children and...
This was, I think are you referring to the migrant workers of northern Maine? This was the worst motor vehicle fatality in Maine history, up on the Allagash Waterway. A van with migrant workers speeding along this road missed a bridge. It's a 1-lane bridge, and off they went into the Allagash waterway. I can't remember the number, but the death toll was staggering. But one of the workers was able to get out the rear window, and he was the only survivor. And in times like that, for as being a spokesman, you need to get to the scene. And we made a few calls, and a wooden float plane picked me up in Hollowell on the Kennebec River, flew to Sebago to pick up a person that could act as an interpreter, and off we flew to the Allagash. And it was an amazing sight, and in retrospect, it was so preventable. But we had a speeding van, probably trying to get to their work site to get working, and they went off the bridge.
Yeah.
But it was at the same time, you needed to be there. And then once I got there, Nancy, because the communication was so bad, in fact, before I left, the only thing that would work was satellite telephones. So I called the governor's office and I said, I need the governor's satellite phone. And so they came up, showed me how to use it. I lugged it around like I knew what I was doing. I basically cheated. I didn't use it that day because it was just too complicated. But I made the decision I need to get back to civilization so I can start answering these media calls. So in a helicopter that flew a lot of the state police dive team back to Bangor, I hopped on board and I worked out of the Bangor in the Orono barracks of the state police, which is where we were there at the time, getting the first word out of exactly what happened.
In a situation like this, you have to be empathetic or sympathetic, or show that you feel for the victims of a tragedy like this, but you also have to stay calm when you're going on the air. And how do you balance? It's like your head and your heart together.
I want to say practice, because it just is, but it became ingrained in me. I knew what to say, how to say it. And particularly when we were talking that there was death involved, you need to show empathy. And most times reporters are going to ask, why did this happen? And in the early hours, you don't know why. You know what happened. You don't know how it happened. So you basically just repeat a line that I did dozens of times, is that I don't have the answer to that question of why this happened, but we're going to find out. And I thought that was reassuring to the public that we didn't have the answer at this early hour, but we're going to find out. And when we do, we'll let you know. And but there's work to be done to arrive at that conclusion.
And this brings back to me a situation where you and I actually worked together when there was a fatality on a fundraising bike ride in Western Maine. I happened to be doing PR for the bike ride. I actually was riding in it myself. And then I contacted you immediately and said there's been this fatality, and that I wanted to say that we had referred it to the Maine State Police, and the Maine State Police were conducting an investigation. So I felt that was a good thing for an in-house PR person to say, so to speak, to say that an investigation was ongoing.
And that was also my first word, that this tragedy had occurred. One of the bicyclists, I think, got sort of sucked in to a large truck.
18-wheeler.
18-wheeler. And what town was that fatality in?
It was it was in between Bethel and Rumford.
Okay. And there were thousands of bicyclists in this
Over
trek,
1,000,
which continued on to their next destination. And it was a major case, but that is the time where you have public relations professionals working together. And in your case, you're the one that told me about this. I didn't get it from a phone call from within the department. I got it from Nancy Marshall.
Right. But what I'm saying is that if one of our listeners happens to be a PR person for an organization or a company, and something happens of this magnitude, it is a good response to basically to refer people, refer the media over to the state police.
And in your case, you reached out with a telephone call so we could talk on the phone. That's also valuable on both sides too. I knew what you were going to say, And at that point, I was still gathering the facts, but I would deal with the facts of the crash itself and the death. But you were dealing with the fact that we are cooperating fully with state police and we've referred questions to them because they're the investigating agency in this case.
Right. And of course, first and foremost, you need to show empathy towards the family and friends of the victim.
Very much so.
I think that's, even if you don't have any information, if you know that there has been a fatality or people who have been severely injured, you need to show that you have heart.
Yes.
Your organization feels for the people who have.
And in case the listening public doesn't know, you and I are working together now on crisis communication. We've done dozens and dozens of seminars. We have others planned in the immediate future. And you're the one, even though it's after the fact from me on my state career, but you're the one that has emphasized that continually. And it is an incredibly important component of getting the information out to show some empathy. And you can do it with few words, but it shows that you care about what happened for the victim, for the victim's family, the businesses that may have been affected as well, and we're referring the investigative details to state police. And so those are powerful words when they're needed to be heard.
Yes, because there's also an incident that we refer to when we're doing our trainings of a train accident that happened in Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, where the CEO of the train company was more concerned about himself and the impact on him and how horrible it was for him that his company had experienced this train crash where hundreds of people in this little town had died. So I think when you're the spokesman, you're worried about yourself, but you have to put yourself aside. It's not about you.
It isn't about you, and that is for any PR professional. Go to YouTube and watch it.
We'll put a link in the show notes.
And it is startling how callous and self-centered this train president was, who didn't show up there, as I recall, for 2 or 3 days.
Right.
This train calamity wiped out the downtown of this town in Quebec, which was only a few 30, 40 miles from the Maine border. It was literally in our backyard here in Maine.
Right, exactly. So I think that's a big lesson in all of this, is that if you are representing an organization that's in crisis and you're the spokesperson, it's not really about you. It's about the victims and those who have been impacted. And you need to reassure them that you feel for them and that everything possible is being done to get the answers. And of course, that brings me to the question, it's tempting to say no comment. But of course,
it's never tempting for me to say it because I've never said it.
Right.
But Nancy and I talk about that as we give sort of bullet points of what to do and what not to do when we're doing these things. And for everyone that's heard us and for everyone that's hearing us today, the words no comment are never to be uttered again by any trained communications specialist. It sounds terrible. It sounds like you're hiding something. You can say a variety of other things that mean the same thing, such as, I understand why you've asked the question, but in these early hours, I cannot get into those details. Those details will come at a later point, but we're really in the initial stage of this investigation, finding out what happened. That sort of explains it rather than just saying no comment, where you just sound like you're hiding something.
Right. And we assure you we will share that information as soon as we have it.
Exactly.
Stay tuned.
Right.
We will get back to you. And of course, the journalists who are listening to this, they need to trust that you are actually going to get back to them. So you probably should say, we'll get back to you within the hour, or
try to set up a schedule. And of course, in my former life, that the media called all the time, but setting up in a major case, you set up regular news conferences so the reporters can go out, do their things in the field, and know at 2:00 in the afternoon they're to be back at this point to get the official update from state officials who've gathered there.
Right, exactly. So my other question now is, how has the media landscape changed over the course of your career? Because, of course, you started before there was an internet or smartphones.
Yes, smartphones, cell phones,
Yeah.
email, none of that. The news media has had a huge change, primarily revolving around finances. When I started, there were reporters specializing in various fields. There was an education reporter, crime reporter, a health reporter. It went on and on and on. There's no such thing in the newspaper business anymore. And the number of people that are actually working in the newsrooms have been decimated, primarily because of finances. It's not anyone's fault. It's just the way the media, the news media has evolved. And some of it is incredibly, with a cell phone now, you can broadcast anything to the world. Before, when I started out, you needed a telephone. You could be on the biggest story of your career. If you couldn't find a phone to call out, you were the only one that had the information. And you were talking to yourself at that point. Things have changed, and so that's for the good. But it is a shame that so many journalists' positions were eliminated over the years, and the tasks of those newsrooms, newspaper, TV, radio. When I started out in radio back in the early 70s, almost every radio station in Maine had a full-time news department. And I'm not sure there is one left in the state now here in 2023. We do, other than Maine Public Radio. That is the centerpiece of radio news, and they've been able to maintain that because of the special, unique way they've gone about it and their funding base. But on a commercial side, I'm not sure there's a commercial radio news person specifically out there in the state any longer.
Well, the other thing about not having these specialists, these reporters who specialize in real estate or health or education, as a PR person, you need to help bring them up to speed and understand that they may not know the background. And you don't say off the record, because nothing is off the record,
right.
But you might want to say, let me give you some background on this situation just to help frame the story.
And in the old days, when there were editors galore within a newsroom, and before this young reporter was sent out on this, the editor might have a heart-to-heart talk. This is where you're going. This is how we're going to cover it. And that started dissolving when I got into public safety in '88. And there were times where I remember talking to a reporter who had come back from a fatal car crash and was shaken by it because she had never been to one. And we were all young, we were all new, and I tried over the years to be as understanding on that and to try to help foster that. But in the old days, there was an editor back in the newsroom that would give them that guidance. And many times I had to do it.
Right, exactly. Well,
just because there was no editor left in the newsroom to do that task.
Yeah. Well, I think it's something, again, if you're the spokesperson for an organization, you sometimes assume that the journalists know about your industry, but I think you need to assume that they don't.
They don't know about the industry, Nancy. Many of them are new to the business. They're also new to Maine, and they need a roadmap to find Augusta. Yeah. So it is they coming in cold, and as the spokesman, there is an opportunity, a great opportunity, to just give them a wider picture of the industry that you're representing or the specific situation that you're talking about, so they have a better understanding when they go back and start writing the story.
Yes, but I brought it up a minute ago. We don't want to go off the record, and why
Absolutely.
Is that?
The only people that go off the record, the only reporters really that ask off the record are reporters from away. And in my career, these reporters who I'd never met before, you might have seen them on television, but they think you're so impressed because they've come in from New York or Boston or Washington or wherever. And so you're going to now spill your guts to this reporter you have no professional relationship with at all, to give them information that you haven't given the reporters here in Maine. The reporters in Maine are important because they're the people you've dealt with in the past, and they're the reporters you're going to be dealing with next week when these national reporters are gone.
Right.
And my standard reply off the record, was, I don't go off the record.
That's right. And also, it's important to remember, because we do have listeners from across the country and around the world, actually. So you do need to remember that those journalists who are from your hometown media, those are the people who are going to always be there in good times and bad covering your stories. So it's really the most important to honor that relationship.
Because you want to work with them in the future.
Exactly.
And therefore, they remember you guiding them on whatever story it was. And you build up a healthy, professional relationship with them that benefits both of you, the industry that you're representing and the reporter who has a better knowledge of whatever the subject is.
Right, exactly. I always remember when I worked at Sugarloaf, we had an annual event that was called Yellow-Nosed Vole Day. And the yellow-nosed vole was a little like mouse-like creature. It was nearly extinct. And they had a day to honor this little vole because they were threatened by all the skiers on the mountain. So it was kind of a non-story, because we had this every year and I was always calling the media saying, oh, please, could you do a story about yellow-nosed vole day?
And how was the reception on the other end? Because I know if you had called me at the radio station, I would have assumed that, what are you talking about?
What I found is if I had cooperated and given this journalist more information when things were not going so well, like if we had had a lift accident, if I had cooperated, they were more likely to trust me and maybe do something on a story that wasn't quite as timely. So,
and you never know when you have something to promote, you never know what type of day that reporter's having.
Right.
And it could be, we're taping this on a Friday afternoon. I remember Friday afternoons were always deadly because nothing was going on. Everyone was starting to leave early for the weekend and all that. And a reporter still has something to write, space to fill in the morning paper or a segment that they have to get on weekend radio or TV. And you hit them at just the right...
That's when I want to call about Yellow-Nosed Vole Day at Sugarloaf.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, we're going to continue with more from Steve McCausland in just a moment, but don't forget, as a listener of this show, you can get the first chapter of my book, Grow Your Audience, Grow Your Brand, for free by visiting prmaven.com/giveaway and sign up for our email list to receive the first chapter. We'll be back in just a moment with more from Steve McCausland.
Sprague & Curtis is a locally owned real estate company. We're primarily focused in central Maine. I got excited about Nancy's book because she's so well known in the area for her marketing and branding techniques, and we're always looking to expand and learn and grow, and so a lot of us here at the office decided that we wanted to read her book and learn some new techniques.
It benefits Sprague & Curtis to have a large brand and audience because there can often be multiple years between transactions with clients, so it's important to network with them and stay in touch with them in those in-between periods. And this book really helped us learn some techniques and methods to continue to do that. We organized a small book group with Nancy's book with brokers in our office this winter to share information and remind ourselves how important it is to always be working on our network and continually reaching out to our customers.
Platforms like social media are important in expanding your business, but equally as important are handwritten notes, cards, letters. She inspired me to send her a note of appreciation, just thanking her for the book and her insight. In reading Nancy's book, I was excited to look to continue to grow our brand and our audience. I think she does a great job of motivating us.
Nancy's book really helped me learn a few things in marketing and branding and how important it is to stay on top of reaching out to clients periodically, staying top of mind, providing useful information, and really telling our story as a company.
Welcome back to the PR Maven Podcast. And remember, to get a free chapter of my book, go to prmaven.com/giveaway, and we'll send you the first chapter for free. And today, I'm talking with Steve McCausland on the PR Maven Podcast. And the podcast is also available on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So we're everywhere you want to be. So, Steve, when we work with clients who are not yet in crisis, we try to help them imagine scenarios that could happen and what their response would be. How does that work?
Well, the first thing it works is that they're taking the initiative to learn how to do it. Because when things happen, it happens like this. And you've got to have some pre-planning underway long before the issue hits the fan, that of knowing how you would respond. The explosion I talked about in Farmington, a death within a company that affects the CEO, a shooting that before the end of October we thought we were immune from in Maine, and we learned sadly it happened here as well. And pre-planning is very helpful for the spokespeople to start thinking about what would I do if this happened, and how would I prepare, and who do I contact internally and externally. And that goes a long way. But you got to think about it beforehand, because there's no time to do it when the crisis is hit.
Right. But also there is message mapping that can be done. That's another technique we talk about. So you could essentially kind of have a message map where you fill in the blank about what the incident was specifically, but you can talk about how your organization is devoted to the safety of its employees and its guests or its customers.
And in the last 3 years since you and I have been working together, we have advised dozens of nonprofits, businesses, government, and the list can go on and on. And we craft a program for them about what could happen, giving possible scenarios that they would have to react to emphasize the fact they need to plan for these events and to have something not only prepared, but something they can refer to. The message map, which is just a wonderful way of sort of organizing things. And where's that file? We've got this issue, and you pull out your Marshall Plan.
Right.
And that goes a long way, and they're pulling that out because they had the foresight to start training long before the issue really hit.
Right. So recently we worked with an outdoor education nonprofit in Alaska, of all places, and we helped them envision a scenario where they had an ice fishing accident and some of their students fell through the ice. So we created this scenario, and then we did role playing with their spokespersons. They had several that we
might fill that void.
Right.
And this ice fishing accident, we had it that even though it's on a remote lake in Alaska, we had someone with a phone. This is mine right here. It's on silent. But we had someone with a phone that was videoing this rescue. And the scenario was one of the Anchorage stations picked it up. And the scenario continued because CNN picked up what was being broadcast. So an issue that is on a remote lake in Alaska or any place in Maine or any place in the world can go international like that.
Well, that reminds me of a lift.
I knew this story was coming. It's a Sugarloaf one.
Sugarloaf. When I was working with Sugarloaf, there was a lift that derailed, and essentially the people on this chairlift were like suspended in the air, kind of swaying in the wind. There happened to be a CNN reporter on that lift who immediately went on his cell phone and he started broadcasting live from this chairlift that was swinging in the wind. And I don't think Sugarloaf people even knew that he was up there, because he was just a skier, right, who had bought a lift ticket and gone up. So that can happen at any time. You never know.
And you never know who that person is that has the cell phone. But you see it all the time in an incident. the national news organizations always go for that cell phone coverage because, first of all, it's there at the immediate site of whatever calamity they're talking about, and it shows the drama and the and exactly what happened in literally real time.
That's right.
Yeah.
So why is it important to rehearse in advance of speaking with a reporter? And how do you do that exactly?
I'll go back to the Farmington explosion. Travel time for me was probably 35 minutes between Augusta and Farmington. And as I'm going up, I'm starting to think about what to emphasize, how to say it, and you sort of practice it. You don't do it in public, but you basically find a place where you can compose your thoughts, possibly bring in some key people within your organization to bounce these ideas off from, of what sounds well, good, with empathy, what things should I avoid, and you sort of practice. You practice, and sometimes you flub up, but you're flubbing up all by yourself. So when you go in front of the news conference, you're rehearsed. It's like a performance,
right?
Because you want to present the best possible case for your organization that you represent, and one way to do that is to have to basically have a keen sense of what you're going to emphasize, and what you're going to avoid. And it works out. It works out. And just because you did not answer the question does not mean the media is not going to ask you the question again. But it's the same answer. You can say it in a slightly different way to make it sound maybe more succinct. But it's not the question that counts. It's the answer. That's
right. Yeah, I think that's important to remember, is that those journalists are not the boss of you. You're not obligated by law to answer their question exactly, right?
Right.
So
and all of us in Maine, coming off the aftermath of Lewiston, watched those news conferences that public safety had. And the loudest reporters in the room were from away. And they were sort of, and the governor got caught up in this too, in one of her news conferences in Augusta. Because they're so important, these reporters that have come in think that we are going to drop everything to cater to just them. It's not the question, it's the answer. And in that case of that, and in the cases we've talked about, always remember, it's the local reporters you're going to be working with next week, because those national folks are long gone.
Exactly. They're moving on to the next story.
Right.
Yeah. So again, why is it important not to say no comment?
Well, it sounds terrible. It just sounds like terrible. And again, there are alternatives that you can say. It's not appropriate for me to talk about that. This is in the very early hours. I don't have any information on that I can share with you.
Right.
That's basically saying the same thing as no comment, but it's far more empathetic, which seems to be the theme of the day here with you and I.
Yes.
And it's understandable. And the public sits back and watching this or listening to it and go, that's understandable. The event only occurred 2 hours earlier. Why would they have all the answers?
Right.
But it doesn't stop the questions from coming from reporters. But you control the microphone, and the answers you control, and it's the answers that count the most.
Right. And you may think that these reporters are being rude or aggressive, but that's their job. They're trying.
Well, I thought in Lewiston, frankly, that they were incredibly loud, and it was uncalled for. The news conferences sort of took a life of their own, because these reporters were literally drowning out the Maine reporters that were also in the room, trying to ask questions that may be Maine-based, that Maine people would want to know about. But it was these reporters that were the loudest, whose voices you did not recognize.
Right.
But if Don Kerrigan had the first question, it's a voice and face everyone knows in this state, and it's reassuring. He's the dean of Maine's broadcast journalists. Don, what's your first question?
Right.
And you can go from there, and you do that by controlling the news conference from the podium.
Right. Exactly. Okay, Steve. So, what is a book a website, or an app that has been influential to you in your career, and why?
I knew this was coming. Nancy gave me at least a heads up that this question was coming. And there's two books that I think I have utilized in my career that started in 1970. And one is the Associated Press style book. It's called the AP Style Book. And it's available on the web. It's available, there are used copies everywhere on Amazon. And it is really succinctly how reporters should write and the terminology they should do. And I've referred to that hundreds of times in my career. The second one, Nancy, is The Elements of Style, written by two folks named Strunk and White. The White, for anybody here in Maine, was E.B. White, the children's author.
The author of Charlotte's Web.
And Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little. But he wrote this book, and it's a very small read, and I made, knowing that we were going to talk about this, I'm going to pull it out of my bookshelf and read it again, because every time I read it, I remember another tidbit that I've forgotten about. But his basic premise of the book was less is best when you're writing, and now I've gone to a blank on the second one. But, you know, you don't have to say a lot of words to sound important. You can, and the best writing is rewriting.
That's right.
The best writing is rewriting, and less is best.
That's right.
And those are elements of that book which affects anyone who writes, whether you're in public relations or any other profession. It's a well-written book because it's in clear, simple English that we all understand.
And with PR, if you are a PR professional, if you write your press releases according to the AP style guidelines, your press release will be regarded, it will be received with more respect than if you write something that is not in the same style that the journalist is going to be writing.
That and the fact of that length in this count, the longer you go, the more blank those eyes are on the receiving end of that. Would this PR person really get to the point as they're going off on paragraph 10?
Right.
You can say an incredible lot in any news release by saying less and being succinct about it. And those two books have given me a great deal of reference information over the years. And hopefully it might be helpful for those of us, those who are listening or viewing this podcast.
Yeah. So thanks, Steve, for joining us today. It's been nice to have a conversation with you.
Well, we talk quite often because we do crisis communication often, but it's nice to see the PR Maven in action. Even though we see each other regularly, but to see you in action on your podcast. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. If you have any questions for our guest or would like to hear more about a certain topic, you can send me an email at nancy@prmaven.com. And we hope you have a great day, PR Maven Nation. Thanks for listening to this episode of the PR Maven Podcast. I invite you to share a review of the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation on Facebook. It's free to join, and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you use an Alexa device, use your Alexa app to search the Skills and Games section to find and enable the PR Maven Podcast Flash Briefing. This will give you access to exclusive content and more PR and marketing advice. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.